Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now. Black power.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. I'm Greg Carr, sitting in for Roland, who is on his way to Ethiopia. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Convicted felon and imperial president Donald Trump wasted no time trying to cash in on the Supreme Court's ruling, giving presidents some immunity. We'll examine how the conservative-leaning court, its ruling, could impact his New York criminal sentencing. A Wisconsin school is facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for not protecting a black teen from being sexually abused by a white female teacher in 2016. We'll talk to him and his attorney about why they have filed lawsuit so many years later. The last two survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre want President Joe Biden to open an investigation into the deadly attack after the Oklahoma Supreme Court decided to dismiss the survivors' lawsuit seeking reparations. Today is the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We'll discuss why there isn't much to celebrate as many of those rights are being taken away right before our very eyes. A Louisiana parish finally swears in its first ever black sheriff. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Well, Donald J. Trump wasted no time after the Supreme Court ruled that presidents have some immunity from crimes to try to get his New York conviction overturned. Trump's lawyers argue his New York conviction should be overturned based on the Supreme Court's decision, saying that the district attorney should not have been allowed to introduce evidence about official acts that Trump took while in office. Trump was convicted of 34 counts of falsification of business records in May. Legal analyst Monique Presley, the host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley, joins us to explain how the Supreme Court's decision could impact Trump's conviction. Good to see you, sis. Can you please help us make this make sense? What is going on? What's going on, Counselor?
Well, I mean, I think his lawyers are doing what they're supposed to do. You know, the Supreme Court has changed the law. They have abandoned hundreds of years of precedent and decided that there is a whole new kind of immunity for official acts that did not exist before, that applies only to presidents. And now his lawyers are saying, okay, well, if he had this type of immunity, in what way would that have affected the most recent criminal trial? And they're trying to get the judge to look at it and make a change.
What's your sense, given that it looks like John Roberts tried to craft out some things? So help us. Let me make sure I get this straight. So if he had any of the conversations related to paying off Stormy Daniels or any of that while he was in the White House with his chief of staff or anybody, are his lawyers arguing that that evidence has to be excluded? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, not conversations. Yes, I guess it depends on what you mean by conversation. Okay. They would consider official acts, right, to be conversations that he had with people who were working for him in the White House. They considered, at the time of the trial, they tried to get the trial judge and then an appellate judge to decide that his statements on social media, because he was president, were official acts. So they're basically trying to say anything that happened that was a part of this criminal activity that happened after he became president would be considered an official act. But I'll go ahead and answer your question, Dr. Greg. No. I mean, the trial judge said no, the appellate judge said no. I would expect that Judge Merchan would again say no, no, and a no, 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 in that the actions regarding this particular set of activities, criminal activities, had to do with actions that were taken before he got in the White House in order to help him get into the White House. And so the fact that he cut a check, that he paid a bill, paying your phone bill after you become president is not an official act, because you're the president. So neither is paying off your lawyer for paying a bribe, for paying for, all of your little gangster-like activities don't become official acts just because you are the president. But I don't fault his lawyers for trying. And I think that it is necessary for the judge to look and to make a determination about it, or else it'll just be subject of the ongoing appeal.
Mm-hmm. And in that vein, all these commentators are saying that the Supreme Court yesterday basically gave him full immunity by delay. So what's your sense of the timeline for this? What is the New York court saying now in terms of allowing him to make this case, the DA's office then responding, and then, going forward from there? What's your sense of the timeline?
Well, the judge released something saying that he's going to make a decision in early September. And so that's going to give an opportunity for full briefing. That's going to give an opportunity for cases to be weighed. The other thing that I want to add that I believe is important, because some people are asking, okay, the Supreme Court just did this. What does this have to do with prior actions, prior things that he did at the time that the law was different, or at least where we thought we knew what the immunities laws were? Like, if they did find that there were some things that were considered in evidence that wouldn't have been in evidence. But the Supreme Court, where criminal cases are concerned, usually the determination is made that those decisions are retroactive, especially where they are deciding that you cannot be prosecuted at all for a particular activity. And you can understand the sense of this, right? If they decided that you no longer can be prosecuted for murder, even though you could have been back then, that's one thing. If they decide you cannot be prosecuted for murder and never should have been able to be prosecuted for murder, that's another thing. And there would be no justification for keeping people in jail. So unfortunately, back when the court was making sense and doing things that made sense for criminal defendants, it now may end up inuring in some way, shape, or form to the benefit of this president. However, I like the fact that he'll be getting sentenced in September.
So then, okay, so whatever the judge rules, let's say the judge rules that everything is clear and we're going to go ahead with the sentencing, Trump's team won't appeal? There's no appeal from that?
Well, it's going to be part of the appeal. They're going to, they don't have a right to an interlocutory appeal that is on that specific evidentiary issue, because that's all it would be. It would be an evidentiary issue as to what evidence does or does not come in. And I'm certain that maybe the judge will split a little bit of the baby and say, okay, I'll give you a little pinky toe in the water, but this little piece of evidence, whether the jury had seen it, had analyzed it or not, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. That's not even the basis upon which they decided. It may come out something like that, but the judge is going to decide, and then there's going to be a sentencing. And like I said, if he does end up getting sentenced, being sentenced in September to home confinement or something, that's cool.
Wow, while he's campaigning. Yeah, he'll probably just spin it as something he can take advantage of. After that opinion came out yesterday, the whole country, all the non-lawyers want to know what interlocutory means in terms of like John Roberts using that term. I know it's beyond the scope of today's ruling in New York, but any thoughts on Atlanta? These judges have to be pulling their hair out now that John Roberts has these lower court judges trying to distinguish between what's official and what's non-official. Any thoughts on how this might impact what's going on in Atlanta? I mean, separate from obviously the attempt to remove Fani Willis.
Delay, but I do want to explain. If I apologize. Interlocutory means
no. Please don't apologize.
Right?
Everybody needs to know.
That means you have a right to an immediate appeal of an issue. It's interlocutory, meaning it's happening right now. You're not waiting until the trial is fully over and then appealing something on the merits. It means you have a right to chase it all the way up the chain, stop all of the current action, and go up and get immediate relief. And so what I am saying is I do not believe that will happen with this particular ruling if the judge decides that there were no official acts. But it's a delay no matter what. And that's what I would say about these other cases. It's a delay, but it's delayed but not denied. That's all we do. More cliches, right, Greg?
Yes, ma'am.
But it's true in that the actions that he is accused of have nothing to do with the office of the president. So even though they're trying to give a pass for certain conduct, ain't no way you can say that the man who lost the election is in his official capacity trying to muscle governors into lying and saying something different, sending, people out in order to harass people who are working at the polls. All of these actions are not about the official business of the United States. These are about the actions of candidate Trump. And we've had to, in many ways, that's why there's all kinds of campaign finance reform laws and all kinds of, FEC laws and et cetera. We separate candidate from office holder all the time. So judges are capable of doing this. There's plenty of case law for them to work with on that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm going to bring in our panel for a moment, and then we'll go to break and maybe come back and continue this conversation with, of course, our brother, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for the environmental justice for the EPA, currently under attack with the rest of the administrative state. Teresa Lundy, principal founder of TML Communications out of Philadelphia, PA, and of course, Dr. Ali is coming out of Washington, D.C. And our brother, Larry J. Walker, assistant professor at University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida. And Larry, I understand that a raft of laws went into place yesterday, July 1st, there in the state of Florida, for everything from homelessness to everything else. So, brother, why don't we start with you? Maybe any questions for our sister Monique?
Yeah, Monique, thanks for joining us, and I appreciate everything you do. I wanted to know, obviously a lot has been made over the last several hours about what the Supreme Court decided. And I wonder if we hypothetically can take a look at a Trump presidency. And I know you probably tweeted about this and talked about this in other platforms, but using New York, what's happened in New York, what happened in New York as an example, how do you foresee a Trump presidency as related to his immunity trial? Because I think people need to hear it consistently about what it looks like that the Supreme Court made this decision, and now former President Trump is going to feel empowered to make some steps as it relates to current and former politicians, journalists, et cetera, and how he can use that as a cloak to say this is official. It was official business.
Well, I mean, they handed him the gun. They handed him the gun for his threats. He was already threatening to hold political opposition responsible in courts of law. He was already threatening to, go through his list of people who are his enemies and hold them accountable. His underlings, his sycophants were already saying, Bannon was going to jail saying that the head of the Justice Department and the assistant heads of the Justice Department he was predicting they were going to be serving time. So if you put a gun in the hand of someone who already is threatening to shoot people and then tell them, oh, by the way, you can't be punished for this, then that is the exact circumstance that we are in, whether it's press that's considered his enemies, whether it's people from other campaigns, for other parties, whomever it is, he can do whatever it is they're saying as president, and he could declare that they are threats to the United States, that they are threats to our government, that they could, false accusations of espionage or treason could be thrown at them, and he could decide whatever it is, the punishment. They've given carte blanche for conversations between the executive branch and the judicial branch, saying that the president has the right to confer with the Justice Department, with the head of the Justice Department, the Attorney General on cases. All of these things were laid out in that decision yesterday. And I agree with what Sherilyn Ifill said, just one of our respected colleagues in the law, that we have the right to defend our democracy. So what we are looking at is an imminent threat to democracy. And once we secure this election in November and ensure that the immediate threat is behind us and that we do not have an immoral, criminally enterprising felon in the White House, then steps legislatively are going to have to be taken in order to correct this decision as best as possible.
Thanks, Dr. Walker. Thanks, Larry. Teresa, questions for Monique?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of already seen some of the turmoil conversations that is happening on social media about this decision. Is there anything from the legal standpoint that, in conversations that feel like, this is just wrong and they're willing to say something or do something? Or is this from the legal community just like, hey, the decision was made and this is it?
Well, I mean, Sherlyn Eiffel, who I was just using as an example, is a part of the legal community, and any number of organizations are stepping forward and saying that this takes away years and years of precedent. But I can't say in any stronger terms that this is a consequence of voting. Voting matters. And back in the day, I'm going to call 2016 back in the day, this was all on the ballot. And when you have entities within our governing structure that no longer follow rules, especially when it's the parts of the structure that make the rules, that make the decisions about what is and is not legal, we are hamstrung even in terms of the foundations of our constitutional system. So yes, there are people who want to do things to fix it, but it's not an easy thing. We're looking at perhaps amendment to the Constitution. We're looking at having to codify laws in order to put rails on the presidency, because now the Justice Department has decided against it at the top level of our judiciary, and that is not something that is easily undone.
Thank you, Teresa. And bring us home, Dr. Ali. Brother Mustafa, questions for Monique?
Yeah, well, Monique, it's good to see you. We've seen recently a shifting of government power, a dismantling also of where that power resides, and moving that power to folks like the president and to the Supreme Court. Let's overlay for folks Project 2025. So now we have a president that has immunity to do almost anything within his official powers, right? That's the way that they frame it. And now we have Project 2025 that also brings forward this sort of white nationalist agenda of being able to further restructure, take over power. What does it look like moving forward? Because we've got what we've got in this moment. Many people need to have an understanding of what the future could look like, and how does power play out in this new future based upon what the Supreme Court has done and what Project 2025 is promoting.
I mean, this was the plan, Mustafa. This is it. Because if you can remove the strength from the voter and put it in the hands of a compromised Manchurian candidate of a man, that is the last grab for power. I was on Karen Hunter's show yesterday when this all came out, talking to Reese. Reese was guest hosting, and Erica was co-hosting with her. And that was the one comment that I made that I will repeat. The vote they're trying to come after is because we are getting browner and browner, and they can see without a doubt the end of power sitting in majority white, older, male with money. This country will not be that for much longer. And the only way to keep it from happening is to make the vote less powerful, make the vote weaker and weaker, and put the strength into the hands of people who will make arbitrary, capricious decisions that stack the deck so that our vote no longer matters. So what we are trying to arrest right now is this entire plan. And it's only if you care about the system of democracy. And I hope for people who were saying at some point, doesn't matter who the president is, it's all the same. Doesn't matter who ends up on the Supreme Court, it's all the same. I hope you are seeing now how untrue that really is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mustafa. And thank you, legal analyst Monique Presley, the host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley. Thank you for being always ready and on short notice to come in and walk us through this. Thanks so much, sis.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Always. So this is Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, you see the headlines. All frightening, right? Interest rates are going up. The recession is on the way. The stock market is up and down. But you know what they say, scared money don't make money. That's why I'm excited on our next Get Wealthy to have a conversation with someone who has written a new book, Fearless Finances, and she's going to share exactly what you need to do to secure your bag regardless of the ups and downs of the economy or the stock market.
Oftentimes you can start with as little as $5.
That's right here, only on Get Wealthy on Black Star Network.
Next on the Black Table with me, Greg Carr. Dr. Gerald Horne, a man regarded by many as the most important historian of our time. He provides us a history lesson I'm betting you've never heard before.
Texas enslavers who planned to continue the conflict even after Appomattox, even after the formal surrender of Robert E. Lee.
Dr. Horne talks about his new book, The Counter-Revolution of 1836, Texas, Slavery, and Jim Crow, and the Roots of U.S. Fascism. You do not want to miss this conversation. Only on the Black Table, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, my name is Freddie Ricks. I'm from Houston, Texas.
My name is Sharon Williams. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. A Wisconsin school is hit with a $20 million lawsuit for not intervening to stop a white female teacher from sexually assaulting a black teenage boy. Elizabeth Dillett of Franklin, who served as a kindergarten teacher at St. Peter Emanuel Lutheran School's athletic director and as the athletic director there in Milwaukee, pleaded guilty in 2016 to having sex with Josiah Strong, who was only 14 years old at the time. Josiah Strong joins us along with his mother, Sarah Strong, and his attorney, B. Ivory Lamar. They're joining us right out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, no, the pleasure is ours, brother. That's why the Black Star Network exists, in fact, to have this essential conversation. Counselor, why don't we start with you, if that's all right, and give us a framework for how we should be talking about this case and where we are, and then we'll move to Ms. Strong and to you, Brother Josiah.
Absolutely. Dr. Carr, this is a situation that, as you mentioned, occurred beginning somewhere around 2015, in which Elizabeth Dillett has sexual intercourse with Josiah. She groomed him over a period of time, resulting in sexual intercourse occurring at least 15 to 20 times, many times happening directly at the St. Peter Emanuel Lutheran School. Some of the occasions also occurred in her own home. She took him to hotels as well. Josiah also performed work for this school. He was hired to be a janitor under Ms. Dillett's supervision, and she abused that. She took that opportunity to have him also be a volleyball assistant coach, pulling out bleachers, doing all these various tasks that he was not compensated for. The only exchange that he received was for sex and food. So in essence, Mr. Strong, at 14 years old, was essentially a sex slave to Ms. Dillett, helping her achieve her goals with the school and her objectives, and the school benefited. And the only person that lost here was Mr. Strong, who has suffered with this over all these years, dealt with all the trauma. This has to be one of the most outrageous, flagrant, egregious circumstances I've heard in an education setting ever. So as a result, we have filed a $20 million lawsuit against Elizabeth Dillett in the St. Peter Emmanuel Lutheran School.
I mean, this is stunning, brother. I mean, stunning to hear. I mean, to hear this type of egregious behavior 15 to 20 times. Once, of course, is too much, but 15 to 20 times with a 14-year-old boy. Now, Brother Josiah, and thank you. Brother Josiah, you are 24 now? This was about a decade ago?
Yes, sir.
Talk to us, brother. And first of all, I think we are all in common accord of saying that this is horrifying, and we're glad that you're here to tell this story and healthy and able to stand and fight. But regardless of where you are now, take us back, if you can, gently to the time and the context of what happened.
First off, I want to say thank you for having us. It's been a long journey since, but just going back in that time period is just something I kind of relive every day now. But I would say it was just something, like you just explained, kind of horrifying, something that it takes. And I know it's still going to take a pretty long time to get over, heal from, and just back then, just understanding where I am now, just back then, and taking myself through it. I just have to apologize and forgive my younger self, because I did blame that person a lot for feeling like I was the issue and like it was my fault for everything. But the biggest thing now is, like I said, just being able to overcome a lot of what happened in the past and what I did experience, just losing a lot of my childhood completely, and just having to, as I got older, try and gain that childhood back, and it just caused a fight between my younger self and the person who I wanted to become over time. And then just looking back, it was just something that during that time I lost myself. I was very closed off. I realized how often I didn't have friends. Many nights I did not sleep, struggling whether to know or understand if I'm gonna actually be able to overcome something like this. And just that was really the biggest thing for me. Just going back and thinking about it, it was just something that I really, one of the biggest, I'm not going to say regrets in my life, but one of the biggest regrets in my life that I just even allowed to happen. But again, it's not my fault. And still kind of trying to figure out those emotions just in the past, just more so understanding that I lost a lot of my childhood, lost a lot of who I am. And it's just a tough fight trying to get that back.
No, absolutely. And we know no matter what we know with our head, that of course it's not your fault. We know that of course we're all human, and you've had to work through this. Very fortunately, of course, to have the love and support and defense that has come from your mother. Ms. Strong, if you don't mind jumping in here for a moment. According to the reports, another student's parent had tried to report this. The principal got involved, tried to say it was something between you and another, and the teacher. Talk to us about standing in that gap to protect Josiah and what that process was like, especially since people were trying to tell about this before any action was taken, and it doesn't look like any action eventually was taken. Could you talk to us a little bit, Ms. Strong?
Yes, you're exactly right. Trying to stand in the gap. You, as a parent, you send your children to school with the expectation that, you know, the teachers and staff and administration are going to treat your children as close to their own children. You expect them to protect them and shield them from certain threats that occur, right? In this situation, yes, another parent had brought up some concerns with the school. At the time, I was not aware of what her concerns were. She brought those concerns to the school. There was a meeting called. I went to the meeting. In essence, there was like no physical evidence per se. And I recall in that meeting, you know, basically telling Ms. Gillette herself, you know, what's done in the dark will come out in the light, you know, and then to only find out later on that per se you got warning, and then sexual abuse continued even after that meeting. It was blatant. It was predatory. We hear about it, and I kind of made this statement at an earlier press conference today. We hear about it happening a lot in different systems, and it's just time that people that are in authority, they need to be held responsible for the damage that they place on children. Josiah went through a lot. His family is going through a lot. It's affected his siblings. It's affected his relationships moving forward in life. I've had to deal with suicidal behaviors and trying to seek him counseling earlier on. And as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, they don't want to go to counseling. I'm just going to be honest. They don't want to go to counseling. So he was shut down. He would go because he was told he had to go. But at the end of the day, the therapist would tell us he's not talking. And so to get to this point now, I am so incredibly proud of him. Today, I told him he is my hero. It's a lot for anybody as a victim of sexual abuse, but for a black male, this was a white woman. It changes the narrative. And I explained that I want it to be more normalized so that more children can seek justice for what happens to them. And a lot of times people don't have that way. They don't have the resources or the capability to do so. But it's wrong what happened to him. And it's taken him this long to seek and find who he is. His education was affected. Couldn't finish college. The concentration wasn't there. He wasn't able, is still working on trying to maintain and hold down a job, because once he gets a job, his whole mindset goes somewhere else after a while. And it's a lot that he's had to endure. But on today, I feel like healing begins because he was able to come out and say things that I haven't even heard him say over the last decade.
Oh, wow. Oh, that is very powerful. I mean, the strength is clearly there, and with the love and support, and with this story becoming known by more and more people, certainly we're doing our bit here at the Black Star Network. We're just going to pour all that strength into you. We're going to come back after the break, Ms. Strong, with you and Josiah and Biavri Lamar, and we'll throw it open to our Tuesday night panel to have a conversation with them about this case and what happens next. Here we are, Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we'll be right back on the Black Star Network.
On A Balanced Life, it takes a village to raise a child, and truer words have never been spoken. If you're raising a child, you know that it's a blessed challenge like no other. Even more so if your child has a disability. We'll talk to parents and our expert panelists about the best way forward for your child to help you maintain your own sanity on A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie on Black Star Network.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
If we look at all of the best mans, the movies, and then, of course, the series on Peacock. Why do you think it resonated so well?
Well, I think it's a reflection of us. You know, I think it's a reflection of authentic black people, the way they see themselves. And in some instances, aspirationally so.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. We are speaking again out of Milwaukee with Biavri Lamar, attorney for Josiah Strong, and his mother, Josiah's mother, Sarah Strong. We're talking about this $20 million lawsuit that a Wisconsin school has been hit with as a result of Josiah being sexually assaulted repeatedly by a teacher at this school 10 years ago. Let's go right to our Tuesday evening panel. Teresa, please, let's open up with some questions for the Strong family and for Counselor Lamar.
Well, one, I just want to open up with condolences. This is never an easy issue to, speak about in public and also handle in private. And definitely you are strong. You are your last name. So I definitely appreciate that and the work that your lawyer is doing. I'm hoping that more others in terms of law firms are doing the same thing in terms of lawsuits, because, you apparently are showing that inside of the school system where they are receiving state, local, and federal dollars, mostly state and local dollars, though, they're not doing the protection. They're not educating students. And so I think my question is, if they're, I'm out here in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, if we could help in any way, if there's a campaign going, please let us know. I'm looking at the Newswire and I was reading the story and I'm overly disgusted. So I don't have much to say, but 20 million is just not enough. We need more. So if there's something we can help to do to amplify, your efforts, please let us know.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Yeah, I mean, it kind of does leave you speechless, doesn't it? Mustafa.
Yeah, Brother Josiah, I understand sexual assault intimately, and I know that it impacts you both mentally, physically, and spiritually. And it's not your fault. It was a predator that took advantage of a child. And I'm sending love and light to you. And we can always talk offline if that's helpful. For your attorney, Lamar, the question is, was there ever an investigation done? Now, we know that there was a parent who raised some set of concerns, but there should have been an elevation, whether to the school board or someone else, when you have this type of a situation going on. And then I have a follow-up question for Josiah.
Unfortunately, there was no investigation whatsoever. We believe that the principal whom the report was made with initially, she was just completely indifferent to this circumstance. In fact, the parent was so passionate about trying to get action, trying to get some type of resolve, that she had to almost threaten the principal by stating that if you do not have a meeting where I can at least communicate this directly to the mother, that she was going to go to the school board or, take measures to the next level. And it was only then when there was a meeting that was arranged with the actual teacher, the perpetrator, Ms. Strong, who's with us today, along with the principal. And that's when that information was communicated. Ms. Strong asked, at that time, I demanded a formal investigation to take place. She asked this principal for a formal investigation. Nothing happened. No contact was made with Child Protective Services. Nothing further was done. No communications. No support was offered to Mr. Josiah Strong. So again, this was allowed to happen for another 4 months, in which there was 6 to 7 more acts of sexual intercourse directly in the classroom of the school because there was no investigation. So again, we're very appalled, and I believe this is just flagrant behavior, which helps to justify such a substantial demand that we made in this case.
And Brother Strong, you know, we have, there's a conservative number that over 500,000 rapes and sexual assaults happen in our country. We know that the numbers are much higher than that. And many times it is to women and girls. When it is, when it is brothers, young men or children, male children who it happens to, there's often, folks often say we shouldn't talk about it. It's just that whole machismo thing that we're raised with. As you are going through the healing process, and healing takes a lifetime sometimes, but we also know that as we begin to heal, we want to reach out and help others to make sure that this does not happen to them and that they don't carry that burden with them. Have you given any thought to, as you are going and traveling down your road, how you might want to give back?
Yes, absolutely. In many ways, the biggest way is starting with today, me being a voice for, most importantly, men who have been through this. I know it's from experience. I know this is something very hard to talk about and speak about. It's something even hard to overcome or even want to voice to someone, just because, again, like you said, it's something that we're taught as guys, and I want to say to the world, while I have the opportunity, it's not something that we should be teaching guys. Guys should be, any male of any age should have the ability and opportunity to speak his mind, to speak how he feels, to speak what it is he has been through openly, especially when it comes to sexual abuse. And I'm speaking on that with so much aggression because my experience through this, going through high school, it was celebratory for a lot of people and for a lot of my classmates or guys who are older than me and younger than me. And I just want to say to whoever has friends like that, or, if you know someone who has been through it, I encourage you, get them help. I encourage the person who has experienced it to go and get help, to speak to someone. Whoever it is you may trust, with your, your biggest secret, talk to them. And I just want to say that it needs to be normalized, that if, just like it is with a man on a woman or a young girl, it needs to be normalized the same way, just as, a woman on a male. It's nothing different. It's nothing different. And as I got older, it was something I realized that helped me understand it's not my fault. And to the guys who have experienced this, it's not your fault. And as Mufasa just said, healing takes a lifetime. And I'm glad I got this opportunity to speak this and say this to you all, because the biggest thing, again, like I said, if you are a male who has experienced this, please speak up. I encourage you to, because it's a lot of things that I experienced and went through, a lot of deep holes that I fell into, that I now have to dig myself out of because of these things, more so emotionally and spiritually. But please, I encourage you to speak up. It's not an easy task, but you deserve it. It's important to you, and most importantly, you matter. Mental health matters. I lost a friend to mental health and to suicide. So that is kind of my plan. Just really be a voice for the males who feel like they can't be one. Because, again, experiencing and going through everything, I never was afraid to be a leader. I never was afraid to speak up. I'm very blunt. I'm very honest. And I get the opportunity today to get that back. And I start with myself. But most importantly, now I get the chance to give this message to everyone, males, and most importantly, please speak up. We deserve it. We deserve it because we matter. We matter.
Let that resonate right there. Thank you, Mustafa, for framing it the way you did. And trust and believe, Brother Josiah. I think we all know that folks watching right now and who will watch later on and over the weeks and months of this conversation that you've opened up, you've already helped somebody with the comments that you said. Larry, please.
Josiah, it's certainly, like I said, reiterate what my colleague said about what happened to you. But I just want to say that I agree with you. You know, she's showing up today and having this conversation undoubtedly will help individuals who've been victimized in some way, encourage them to speak out about something if something similar happened to them. So I think that should be noted in terms of the impact you're having on individuals you may never even meet. So thank you for your bravery, and it is appreciated. What I want to do is I have a question for your attorney. So you filed this lawsuit. I'm curious, what has the response been from the school, if anything, relating to this pending lawsuit?
Well, we have had some conversations with the school prior to filing some time ago. One of the critical components that I think that we have uncovered in recent months was the mother getting her identity. We knew the child who mother she was, so it took some work to kind of find out that individual. We got in contact with her, got her statements, got what exactly happened, what she reported. So once we were able to corroborate that, we thought that was a missing piece to be able to demonstrate that the school had notice of these incidents, of these allegations, and just completely failed, missed the mark, didn't do anything to address these very, very concerning allegations that ultimately revealed itself to be the truth. So that's has some type of context as to kind of how we got here at this point.
Thank you, Larry. And one final question before we pause for now, and we trust and believe and hope that you'll come back and update us on progress as we continue. Counselor, you filed under the Wisconsin statutes for compensatory and punitive damages, and also Title IX. Could you, like Teresa said, $20 million is not enough. There's never enough money. But what's your theory as you're moving forward in prosecuting this case?
Sure. Well, there's a Wisconsin statute that provides for victims of very select crimes to be afforded an extended statute of limitations that provides them up till age 35 to bring a claim. Because the legislature has long considered the effects, the trauma, how individuals are impacted about confronting these type of circumstances. So we took advantage of that statute that provides a direct claim against the perpetrator. And we are also looking to hold the school vicariously liable, seeing that she was able to orchestrate these acts directly from her position, utilizing her authority, and it applied a benefit to the school directly from work that Josiah performed, in essence, for the exchange of sex and food. So we believe that the school is vicariously liable. That leads us to the third claim of the Title IX violation. There's something called quid pro quo sexual harassment, when there's a person in a position of power who utilizes that influence to prey upon an individual, to groom an individual, as she did Josiah. So we're looking to hold them liable for sex discrimination on that basis, in addition to the deliberate indifference that we talked about a little bit, about the school having notice, a principal having notice on 2 occasions, and just completely failing to do anything whatsoever. So again, that is the theory of our lawsuit. Josiah suffering from depression, PTSD, suicidal ideation, drug abuse. All of these things stemmed from this incident. So that also helps support. Obviously, there's no amount of money that will all but give back Josiah his childhood. There's no amount of money that will give him his innocence back. He had no sexual intercourse whatsoever with any individual prior to the teacher in this circumstance. So again, we have to put some type of number, some type of demand. But again, we don't think there's any amount of money that can justify such egregious behavior.
Absolutely. Well, you're fighting the good fight, Counselor, and it's an honor to have you here to walk us through this. This is what our attorneys need to be able to do and need to be able to carry out. B.R. Lamar from the Lamar firm out of Houston, Texas. Thank you, brother. And Josiah, Your strength is on display right now. We're channeling all that back to you, all the love and strength and support. And Ms. Strong, Sarah Strong, thank you for being a model of what parents are supposed to do for their children, particularly in moments of crisis. We're glad you have joined us, and please, as I said, be ready to come back and give us some updates as the case advances. Thank you all.
Do so. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we will be right back.
A lot of y'all have been asking me about the pocket squares that we have available on our website. You see me rocking the Shibori pocket square right here. It's all about looking different. Now look, summertime is coming up. Y'all know, I keep trying to tell fellas, change your look, please. You can't wear athletic shoes every damn wear. So if you're putting on linen suits, if you're putting on some summer suits, have a whole different look. The reason I like this particular pocket square, the Shibori, is because it's sort of like a flower and looks pretty cool here versus the traditional boring silk pocket squares. But also I like being a little different as well. So this is why we have these custom-made feather pocket squares on the website as well. My sister actually designed these after a few years ago. I was in this battle with Steve Harvey at Essence, and I saw this at a St. Jude fundraiser. I saw this feather pocket square, and I said, well, I got some ideas. So I hit her, and she sent me about 30 different ones. And so this completely changes your look. Now, some of you men out there, I had some dudes say, oh, man, I can't wear that. Well, if you ain't got swagger, that's not my problem. But if you're looking for something different to spruce up your look, fellas, ladies, if y'all looking to get your man a good gift, I've run into brothers all across the country with the feather pocket squares saying, see, check mine out. And so it's always good to see them. And so this is what you do. Go to RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. You can order Shibori pocket squares or the custom-made pocket squares. Now, for the Shiboris, we're out of a lot of the different colors, and I think we're down to about 200 or 300. So you want to get your order in as soon as you can, because here's what happened. I got these several years ago, and the Japanese company signed a deal with another company, and I bought them before they signed that deal, and so I can't get access to any more from the company in Japan that makes them. And so get yours now. So come summertime, when I see y'all at Essence, y'all could be looking fly with the Shibori pocket square or the custom-made pocket square. Again, RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. Go there now.
My name is Lena Charles, and I'm from Opelousas, Louisiana. Yes, that is Zydeco capital of the world.
My name is Margaret Chappelle. I'm from Dallas, Texas, representing the Urban Trivia Game.
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you watch.
Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
Attorneys for the last two remaining survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre asked the Oklahoma Supreme Court on Tuesday to reconsider its 8-1 vote to uphold the district court judge's decision in Tulsa to dismiss the case last year. Viola Fletcher, 110, and Leslie Bedingfield Randall, 109, are the last known survivors of one of the single worst acts of violence against black people in United States history. Hundreds of black people were murdered. More than 1,200 homes, businesses, schools, and churches were destroyed. Thousands were forced into internment camps overseen by the National Guard when a white mob, including some deputized by authorities, looted and burned the Greenwood district, also known famously as Black Wall Street. Our brother, civil rights attorney DeMario Solomon Simmons, the founder of Justice for Greenwood, joins us now. DeMario, it's always good to see you, brother.
Man, good to see
you don't let
Dr.
these
Carr.
people get away with nothing. Walk us through what happened today, brother, as you held the press conference and our elders were there and the world waited to see what you were about to drop now. So please walk us through what happened today, brother.
Well, first of all, it's always good to see you, Dr. Carr. You're a hard-working man. I just saw you Saturday on with Karen. I see you on Sirius XM. So it's really a blessing to be on with you.
Bless you.
Yeah, today, you know, we had one of our survivors, Mother Leslie Benefield Randall, who was 109 years old. And what we were doing were two things today. One, we were filing a petition, a rehearing at the Oklahoma Supreme Court, because as you stated, they dismissed our appeal 8-1. But they did it unjustly, and they did it without proper analysis of the law. And, you know, we live in a very dangerous time where laws are not mattering. You know, we're seeing that the courts are just doing whatever they want to do at the state and the national level. But we have the right to do this under Oklahoma law, and so we're going to do it. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can on this case. And we laid out very clearly why the court got it wrong. Not just to say you got it wrong, but this is how you got it wrong. For instance, they changed the law. And Dr. Carr, you know this very well as a lawyer. They changed the law after we filed everything. They changed the actual elements. For instance, an unjust enrichment, which basically we were saying that the perpetrators of the massacre, including the city of Tulsa, raised over $30 million during the centennial, and none of that money went to the survivors, but they were giving people the impression that the survivors and descendants were going to get some of this money. Well, unjust enrichment has never, in the history of Oklahoma, over 100 plus years of litigation, has never required that you plead fraud. But the Supreme Court said, well, since you didn't plead fraud, we're going to kick you out. Then on our public nuisance claim, they specifically ignored the law which allows a public nuisance to move forward if you're talking about blighted property. And that's what you just talked about, Dr. Carr. Over 1,500 homes and businesses destroyed during Greenwood. Many of them never rebuilt. Many of them still uninhabitable or completely destroyed to this day. So that was what we were doing for the state level. But this presentation, this press conference today, was also about talking to the Biden administration. Listen, Dr. Carr, and I know I don't have to tell you, Black people today are trying to figure out why should they stand in those lines and go and vote for this administration. And what we're saying is that the President Biden in 2021, he came to Tulsa. He sat with my clients. He held their hands. He promised them to their face that he would make sure they get justice. And then that was a private meeting. Then he went out and had a public speech where he also said we must confront this history and that he was going to stand with our clients. Well, Dr. Carr, we've been failed by the courts. We've been failed by the state legislature. We've been failed by the Congress. And now we're coming to President Biden and saying, President Biden, you promised my clients you would give justice. And Black people throughout this entire country are looking at the Tulsa Race Massacre as the worst act of domestic terrorism. It is a collective pain and collective wound on Black America. And I think Black people everywhere are saying if Joe Biden and President Biden cannot stand with these survivors at this time and fight for 109-year-old Leslie Benefield Randall and 110-year-old Viola Ford Fletcher, will he fight for Black people? So I'm saying, President Joe Biden, this is an easy win for you, but it's a necessary win for my clients, for our community, and for Black America.
Counselor, I tell you, man, this, and the way I understand it, at the press conference, you evoked the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act as some controlling legislation there. It seems like a no-brainer. Just going back to the Oklahoma Supreme Court for a second, I was reading in the wake of the press conference you all called, one of the law professors you have working with you, Eric Miller, said that the court, of course, rewrote its own public nuisance statute, and you've explained that to us. They just seemed hell-bent and determined to delay. Is that one of the tactics? I mean, what are the politics at work at this, in your estimation?
Well, Dr. Carr, as you know, for over 75 years, there was a conspiracy of silence that the massacre never happened. And over the last 27 years, since that conspiracy of silence was broken in the early 2000s, late 1990s, this has been a delay tactic. We've done so many things along this journey. In 2001, there was a state commission that produced a report that said reparations, cash reparations, was due to the survivors, descendants. There should be scholarships, and there should be a memorial. Those things have not happened, except the scholarship and halfway has happened, but no reparations, no memorial has happened. There's been other litigation. I'm not the first lawyer. Listen, people started filing lawsuits in 1921. I'm standing on the shoulders of the great B.C. Franklin, who's the father of Dr. John Hope Franklin, who was a victim of the massacre. You know these people.
Yes, sir.
And so they delayed those cases that was filed in 1921. They delayed them for 16 years until they finally dismissed them in 1937 without a hearing. They delayed the case that was filed in 2003 by the late, great Professor Charles Ogletree, my mentor, with other lawyers that I worked with, like Johnny Cochran and Willie Gary and Michelle Roberts. And that litigation was kicked out of federal court in 2005. They have delayed when there was another lawsuit filed in 2010 by a massacre victim of an attorney by the name of Caesar Latimer, whose entire family and their businesses were destroyed. They delayed and kicked that out of court. In this particular case that I filed in September 1, 2020, that's been almost 4 years ago that we've been litigating this, and we've been going through every little delay tactic there can be, hoping that these last 2 survivors would die. And Dr. Cora, as you know, when we filed this case, there was actually 3 living survivors.
Yes, sir.
And one of those individuals, my good friend and client, Mr. Hughes Van Ellis, we called him Uncle Red, he passed away at 102 in October.
Yes.
So we do believe they want everyone to die, because what is the tried and true method for white supremacy when we talk about reparations and repairing past harms? Well, there's no one here. No one suffered the harm. Well, you can't say that in Tulsa, and that's why Tulsa is so important to our people nationally, because we understand that a win for Tulsa opens up the door for other wins throughout this country. The reverse of that is just as true. If you cannot win a clear violation of civil and human rights, there is no one to dispute that the massacre happened. There is no one to dispute that the massacre was the worst domestic terrorist event in the history of this country. There is no one to dispute that my 2 clients are survivors and victims of the massacre. Yet they are not getting justice. What does that say to us as Black people throughout this country? That's why I bring it back to President Joe Biden and his Department of Justice. They can right now, tomorrow, he could order that the Department of Justice utilize the Emmett Till Act of 2007, Cold Case Act, which is set up to investigate civil rights crimes that occurred between 1920 and 1970. President Joe Biden can come and stand with these survivors. President Joe Biden can make sure that the federal government opens an investigation. President Joe Biden can make sure that my clients do not die without justice like the other thousands of massacre victims who have died without any form of justice.
Absolutely, brother. Well, I tell you, man, those ancestors whose names you called in the roll and those who still live, whether it be Buck Franklin or Charles Ogletree or Johnny Cochran, Willie Gary, as Sterling Brown once wrote, the strong men, the strong women keep coming. And you're right in that genealogy. And in that vein, Counselor Simmons, even though, as you say, you started with 3 plaintiffs, and do you continue with 3? So even though Uncle Red, even though Brother Hughes Van Ellis has become an ancestor, you're still representing his estate in court. Is that correct? How does that work in terms of even going forward? Because we know that we all got to go that way at some point, and God knows I'd take 102 today, 109 or 110. But either way, as we move forward, would anything stop these claims? I mean, you're still representing Hughes Van Ellis's estate, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. His daughter flew down from Denver, Colorado, Muriel Watson, to represent Mr. Hughes Van Ellis, Uncle Red. And yes, his estate moves forward. And that's the thing about a public nuisance claim, which was so powerful. And other states have public nuisance claims that's very similar to Oklahoma. And it specifically says that there's a nuisance that's ongoing, meaning it's continuing, it's happening right now. There is no statute of limitations on bringing a claim. And so long as someone can show that they are being harmed by the nuisance that is ongoing, they can move forward with the claim. So really, Dr. Carr, anyone within the Greenwood district today that's being impacted by the nuisance can bring that claim. And this is why they kicked us out on this so-called public question doctrine, where they said, hey, this is not for the courts to decide. This is for the legislators to decide. Well, I just told you that the legislators, they've been told since 2001 what they were supposed to do. They're not going to do it. The court just didn't want to deal with this particular issue. And we see, just as we saw with the United States Supreme Court, they can make laws up as they want to. And that's why so many black people are feeling disheartened and discouraged today and thinking about the election cycle and voting. Listen, as you always say, Dr. Carr, there is no question what needs to happen here. There is no question we cannot have Donald Trump, right? There's no question about that. But the question is, are people going to feel motivated to vote at all?
Yes.
And when they see things like Tulsa not getting justice and they don't hear anything from this White House standing up and doing all that it can, this is not something that President Biden needs the Congress to do. This is not something that President Biden needs the courts to do. This is something that President Biden, the Biden-Harris administration can do themselves.
Yes.
This is something that they can say, yes, we're going to fulfill the promises that I made to Uncle Red and Hughes and Mother Fletcher and Mother Randall. I can do this. I am president. I can make sure that this investigation is entered and started for the first time ever in 103 years. If he did something like that, that would send a signal to black people throughout this country that he does understand our pain. He does understand our desires. He does understand our need for make sure that places like Tulsa is made whole. Because when you destroyed Greenwood, you didn't just destroy people in Oklahoma. You destroyed all of black America. Absolutely. That's why people rally around Greenwood. That's why people rally around our survivors.
Appreciate you, brother. And that is so powerful. As you said, Greenwood is a living place. It's a specific place, but it's also a symbol of all of the other Greenwoods and the Black Wall Streets around this country over the arc of years. So that's a very powerful statement. I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back on the other side with our Tuesday panel to ask some questions to our brother Demario Simmons. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
This is Essence Atkins.
It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon.
It's me, Sherry Shepard, and you know what you watch.
You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. Remember to support the Black Star Network. Join our Bring the Funk fan club and make sure that you download the app and tell your friends. Of course, as you know, this is the Black-owned, Black-run network with Black news all the time, 24 hours a day. We're back with Civil Rights Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, founder of Justice for Greenwood, updating us on the latest blow for justice coming out of Tulsa, Black Wall Street, the Greenwood District. And let's start with Larry. Dr. Walker, questions for our brother Demario Solomon Simmons.
Yes. First of all, thank you for all your advocacy. I know this is a lot of hard work. You know, people see you on television, but don't realize the years, all the hours of time you put in to make sure that we try to find some kind of just due for these survivors. So thank you for that. So my question relates to, so making sure that people understand the history is here in terms of what happened in Tulsa. I know you have a very conservative Secretary of Education there, and recently I saw that Oklahoma is instituted in terms of studying the Bible. And I'm really curious to what are students learning about the Tulsa Massacre in schools? Is that something that's been instituted? I know you talked about, a few years ago they had, a commission, and I'm curious, has that been instituted to make sure that we don't see a repeat of what happened more than a century ago?
I appreciate the question, Dr. Walker. I would say, one, that our Secretary of Education, Ryan Walters, was the same guy that a couple of months ago said the Tulsa Race Massacre was not about race. So, you know, we're in a very difficult environment here in Oklahoma. I mean, as a very red MAGA state, it's been a MAGA state for, 15 years before Donald Trump was even thought of running for office. And one of the things I am most proud of about our work, I've been working on this issue since 1997, over 25 plus years. And I remember when I first started, there were very few people that knew anything about the Tulsa Massacre. And those that did, everybody called it the Tulsa Race Riot. And we worked very, very hard to change that. That was not a riot, but it was a massacre, and we've been successful in that. At the time, also, we worked really, really hard to make sure that it gets into the curriculum, and that has happened in some form or fashion throughout the state of Oklahoma. But then we continue to work to make sure that more people know about it. And because of our efforts of like the Watchmen, HBO's Lovecraft Country, and even people like Roland and Dr. Carr and Karen Hunter and many, many other of our partners, the story is out there. But here's the deal, Dr. Walker. We still only know about 10% of what happened with the massacre. That's what's so important about our litigation and discovery process. There are documents, pictures, information that we don't have access to because who has it? It is the perpetrators of the massacre. They have the records. They have the documentation that we need to have access to. So our litigation and the litigations to get justice is not just about a remedy, some type of financial remedy or even a repair. It is also about uncovering the truth, getting more education to make sure that we have more understanding of what happened at this massacre. Because as Dr. Carr said, there was Greenwoods all over this country. The thing that made the Tulsa Race Massacre unique was not because it was burnt down. It's not because it was destroyed. That happened all the time, all over the place, unfortunately. What made the Tulsa Race Massacre unique was because of the size and scope and scale of the community, the size and scope and organization of the community, and the size and scope and scale of the destruction of that community. That is what we're fighting to have a true understanding of. And for all of you all that are listening, go to justiceforgreenwood.org. Justiceforgreenwood.org, our organization. That's one of the things that we do is educate. We call it truth telling. We truth tell about the massacre, the perpetrators, those who did it, and not just about the massacre, but about Greenwood as a whole. We call Greenwood a lot of times Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was a part of Greenwood. The community was Greenwood. It was about 40 square blocks. Black Wall Street was the business district. So sometimes we even have to make sure we're educating people about that, because sometimes the whole Greenwood story gets caught up in this capitalistic mantra that you just pull yourself by your bootstraps. That's not what built Greenwood. Greenwood was not built by capitalism. It was built by cooperative economics, freedom mind state, and people who really wanted to love each other and have self-determination.
Thank you, brother, for making that very important point, because as you say, folks like to line up and say, oh, this is black capitalism. Everybody calm down. You know a little bit more history. So appreciate you, brother, and thanks, Larry, for asking that question. Teresa, please, for Brother Simmons.
Teresa, what's up?
I was muted, but hey, how you doing? Last time I saw you were on CNN, you did an excellent job with your team talking about this issue, and I'm so happy that you're on the national platform doing that. But I literally took the picture. I was like, that's my. Honestly, my question, you already answered it, because I'm sure you've done these programming more than one time talking about the same thing. It was to repeat your website, because some folks in the chat wanted to get more information. So if you could just do that for us one more time, I'll make sure I add it in here.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's good to see you. I used to see you every Tuesday, but justiceforgreenwood.org, justiceforgreenwood.org, and that's the thing about our organization. We do four things really. Number one is what we call our policy advocacy, legal and policy advocacy, is where we do our litigation. We do our work with different elected officials, trying to get them to put in policies and procedures that'll be better for our people. And then we also do what I call our Greenwood, or our WAG program, which we do oral history and genealogy. We just had a huge genealogy event a couple of weeks ago where we had over 300 people come out to learn genealogy. Those who wanted to see if they are connected to Tulsa and the Greenwood community, those who want to see if they're connected to the Black Indians of Oklahoma who helped build Greenwood. There would not be a Greenwood without the Black Indians. My family, I'm a Black Creek Indian. My family came here from Alabama, Dr. Carr from Alabama.
Yes, sir, the
in the
homies.
1830s. I'm actually a Muskogee, I'm a Tuskegee Indian underneath the Creek Nation.
Wow.
And so we educate people about that. Also do your genealogy, make sure we can document you there. Then we have our truth telling, which I talked about education and truth telling, but we're making sure that we're telling the proper narrative from our perspective, both before Greenwood, before the massacre, and the post-massacre, which includes urban development and all our resistance efforts. You know, it's important to understand that we have resisted every step of the way. The whole thing that happened with the massacre, I'm proud, even though we eventually lost that war, it was black men. It was black men, rich black men, who decided they were not going to allow a shoeshine boy named Dick Rowland to be lynched by the Tulsa white community. And these black men, people like A.J. Smitherman, attorney J.B. Stratford, these people who were multimillionaires, lawyers, own newspapers, the largest hotel in Black America, they decided they're going to put everything on the line to go and protect the shoeshine boy. Because again, Greenwood was about love of self and love of community and love of neighbor. And I'm proud of that. And they fought for 12 hours until the mob got so big. At one point, according to the Guard, it was about 25,000 whites rampaging through the city of Greenwood. That's not my words, that's the National Guard. And they broke through our defenses after 12 hours, poured in, looted everything, then destroyed everything. And then the fourth thing that we do, we call our Justice for Greenwood Legacy Fund, where we provide resources to survivors and descendants and community organizations in the Greenwood community. And to date, I'm proud to say we've given over $500,000 over the last 3 years to survivors, descendants in the Greenwood community, including to our survivors who we gave each $100 apiece. That was not reparations. That was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Well, you know, I always have a soft spot, brother DeMario, for the Tuskegees. I mean, you know, like you said, my mother's grandfather, Creek Indian, coming out of that territory where our blood is commingled with the First Nations, man. So it's just so wonderful to hear you doing that work to help families and communities connect their bloodline genealogy and clear the channels of memory so we can strengthen ourselves going forward. Brother Mustafa.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my other guy.
It's good. It's a reunion tonight.
Yes, sir.
The year we all started together. I appreciate the work you do. I love you, brother, with all my heart and your commitment. You know, my grandmother used to have this quote. She said that when you know better, do better. And we know that the state of Oklahoma has never been interested in doing the right thing for our community. Even though we have continued to fight diligently. And I appreciate you raising the point about President Biden and that he could rectify some of the harm and trauma that was done in the past. Can you walk folks through exactly what they should do to make sure that he understands not only the significance of this moment, but that if you want our vote, then you have to show up for our people. So many times people aren't sure, well, what do I do to push to make sure that this becomes a reality?
Man, it's a great question. Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna give you 3 easy things to do that you can do right now. First of all, I'm giving you an email address to Merrick Garland, who is the AG, for those who don't know, of the Department of Justice. And it's ask@usdoj.gov. That's ask.crt@usdoj.gov. Send that email right now and say to Merrick Garland to open up the federal investigation into the Tulsa Race Massacre pursuant to the Emmett Till Act of 2007. That's number one that someone can do. Number 2, I want you to go to justiceforgreenwood.org. I want you to sign up for our to be on our newsletter. We're going to have an active public campaign that we're going to be kicking off specifically targeted to President Joe Biden and that you can participate in. And the third thing I want you to do, I want you to share the 2 things I just told you to 3 people in your network and ask them to do the same thing. If we do those simple tasks, but then by next week after the holiday, because we don't want to start this before the holiday weekend because we know people are going to go and do other stuff. But when we start next week with our campaign, and all of our people are participating and letting the Biden-Harris administration understand that this is a non-negotiable issue, that Greenwood and the Tulsa Race Massacre justice is a non-negotiable issue. We have 2 living survivors at 109 and 110 years old that are symbols of our oppression, symbols of our resilience, and of our the lack of this government protecting our needs and protecting our wants at the highest levels. This is a symbol that this president needs to do, and it's more than symbolism. This investigation is real. This investigation is something that needs to happen, has never occurred. How can you have, Mother Mustafa, how can you have the largest crime scene in U.S. history? Don't even talk about domestic terrorism, but this largest crime scene in U.S. history, and it's never been investigated. You're talking about murder. You're talking about kidnapping. You're talking about rape. You're talking about arson. You're talking about burglary. You're talking about robbery. You're talking about defacing human bodies. You're talking about destroying property. You're talking about over $200 million in property damage alone. What about the legacies that was lost? What about people like Dr. A.C. Jackson, who was considered the greatest doctor in the nation at the time, who was shot with his hands up, not 1 time, not 2 times, not 3 times, but 4 times in the stomach and allowed to bleed out in a concentration camp. I'm not calling it a concentration camp. That's what they called it back in 1921. How can we allow that to stand? How we can allow that to stand when the president can do something about it by getting his Department of Justice to open an investigation as the law allows them to do. We're not asking them to do anything special. We're asking them to just use the law that is available to them.
Brother, I think that just needs to resonate. What a time to be alive and to have the responsibility of taking the baton. You know, and that 2-week, roughly speaking, period between Juneteenth and White Juneteenth, July 4th, that is like almost like a liminal space where we can rethink everything about this place that we live. And I don't believe in accidents, brother. So here we are on the 116th birthday of Thurgood Marshall, born in 1908 in Baltimore on July the 2nd, 1908. And you are one of his living representatives in this space. For all the young people in particular, as you kind of summarize and take us forward in terms of what you plan to do next, and even how your work and those of your comrades inspires. For young people who are tooling around out there, maybe in high school or in college, not quite sure what they want to do and maybe thinking about law school, is this what a black lawyer, social justice warrior looks like, brother?
I'm just at my black job.
Yes, sir.
This is what it is, man. And, you know, I'm glad you brought back to Thurgood Marshall. This is also the 60th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That's right. When you think about how much of a dangerous situation we're in now, we have to always remember we've been in much worse situations. We've been chatteled. We've been enslaved. We've been under black codes and Jim Crow laws. And this is something that these people want to bring us back to. So we need everybody, from our children to our adolescents to our people in the middle ages to our elderly. We all have to get in this, because I'm not trying to go back I'm not trying to go to Jim Crow. My mother was born in Jim Crow. Yes. My grandmother was a sharecropper. My father integrated his high school. My aunt integrated her high school. I'm not trying to go back to that. So we all have to do what we can, how we can, to fight this system. We have 5 or 6 months to make sure that we don't have this type of a dictatorship that has no love for us. But if President Biden doesn't do something on the Tulsa Race Massacre, I fear for this country, because I fear that black people will look to the president and say, you did not step up for us with our greatest need. The thing we want solved more than anything else, to prove that black lives do actually matter, and not to be kneeling with some kente cloths and talking about some holiday, but actually doing something about an actual terrorist event that impacted our entire community over the last 103 years. I fear for us as a community, as a country, but I'm hoping that President Biden and his team will understand that my clients are ready to meet with him, and they're ready to make sure that we can move this investigation forward and get some justice for Greenwood, justice for Greenwood, justice for Greenwood.
Justiceforgreenwood.org. Y'all go to the website and get that email, ask.crt at usdoj.gov.gov. Tell Merrick Garland to turn Kristen Clark loose one more time, because we know she brings the fire whenever she comes into town with those investigations. And number 3, as our brother has said, share that information with at least 3 people in your network. Civil rights attorney, warrior attorney, Demario Solomon Simmons, founder of Justice for Greenwood. Brother, we are always glad to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Peace.
Peace, peace indeed. And you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. We will be right back. Next on the Black Table with me, Greg Carr. Dr. Gerald Horne, a man regarded by many as the most important historian of our time. He provides us a history lesson I'm betting you've never heard before.
Texas enslavers who planned to continue the conflict even after Appomattox, even after the formal surrender of Robert E. Lee.
Dr. Horne talks about his new book, The Counter-Revolution of 1836, Texas, Slavery, and Jim Crow, and the Roots of U.S. Fascism. You do not want to miss this conversation. Only on the Black Table, right here on the Black Star Network.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
It was my junior year at Georgetown, and Spike calls me and he says, Malcolm, what are you doing next year? I said, I'm graduating, you know? He said, take a year off, work on Malcolm X. I said, okay.
But first of all, for the folks who don't know, Spike is
my cousin. Spike is my cousin.
Just the person watching like, how the hell Spike is gonna tell you that it's true? It's true.
Hi, I'm Jo Marie Payton, voice of Sugar Mama on Disney's Louder and Prouder Disney Plus, and I'm with Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
60 years ago today, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 into law, making that the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil rights leaders like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Asa Philip Randolph, and Dr. Dorothy Irene Height surrounded Johnson as he signed the legislation. The law prohibited discrimination based on race, color, sex, national origin, or religion. It also banned discrimination in public accommodations, schools, voting, and employment. Here is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in May of 1963 discussing the importance of the bill's signage.
What difference, Dr. King, will passage or non-passage of the Civil Rights Bill make in all your plans for the summer's demonstrations? I mean, will they go on if it passes, and if it doesn't pass, will it make any difference?
Well, I'm sure we will have demonstrations whether you get a Civil Rights Bill passed or not. Now, I would say that if the bill is passed, it will increase the hope and give the Negro a new faith in the legislative process, and I think it will be possible to keep the demonstrations much more disciplined and nonviolent. On the other hand, if the bill passes, we can see another element present, namely that it will be necessary to enforce it. Passing the bill is simply one step. After it is passed, it must be enforced, and we will have to go into communities all over the South to test compliance. There will be some communities that will comply, and maybe in these communities we won't have to have large-scale demonstrations, but where you have outright resistance and a refusal to comply with the Civil Rights Bill if it passes, we will have to demonstrate in order to get the federal government to take a stand in the area of enforcement.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, May 1964, actually, not 1963, discussing the importance of the signage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's interesting when we pause in this moment to note that blood was shed and that the federal laws that made up that core, that trio between 1964 and 1968 were signed with the blood of black people spilled in ways that these laws have never lived up to the fierce sacrifice of black people. Thinking, of course, about 1963 with the March on Washington, and then the response in many ways to the March on Washington in 1963, the murders of 6 young people in Birmingham, Alabama, not only the 4 little girls at 16th Street Baptist Church, but Virgil Ware and Johnny Robinson later that day in the streets of Birmingham, 2 black boys killed by marauding white nationalists. Dr. King's remarks there from May 1964. We know, of course, Freedom Summer, highlighted by the discovery of the bodies of James Chaney, Mickey Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman three among so many that have been slaughtered and thrown in many ways, as the Snick Singers sang that summer in the Mississippi River. And then the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the murders and the bombings, of course, the beatings in bloody Selma, 1965, and then the Voting Rights Act in the aftermath of that blood spilt, James Reeb's death and Viola Liuzzo and so many others, and then, of course, the murder of Martin King himself, which sadly prompted Congress to act and pass into law the Fair Housing Act. Teresa, thinking about this, 60 years seems like a long time, and then again, it doesn't seem like very long at all. Any thoughts on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what it has meant to us, what it means to you, and how we should be thinking about that on this anniversary?
I have a lot of thoughts on it. It also reminded me of something familiar, which was the movie Selma, right? And we kind of got like a highlighted brief overview of what the Civil Rights Act actually meant and the work that Dr. King and many other stakeholders had to do to actually get it passed. How many times they sat inside of the Congressional Hall to, listen to State of the Union speeches and not be brought up. But then one day, President Johnson decided, enough was enough, and he did it. So, sitting here as 34 years of living, as we think about 60 years, and we talk about it amongst ourselves, we have to think about things that has changed in our lives or some things that have made the same. This bill, this legislation prohibited, discrimination against race, color, sex, national origin, or religion. So knowing, that this matters and why it matters and the reason why we advocate so hard for so many freedoms is, it's a great feeling to have, but it's also something that makes us think about what we are currently dealing with today and age, as we deal with democracy, as we define it, as we, look at history and sometimes of its removal, right? And we got to keep having these conversations, with each other as families to talk about our history because it is being erased. So, the reflection for me and the sum up is it's rewarding. It's refreshing that, again, I can add myself and, those I talk to who are not only behind the scenes using our voice, but we're using our day-to-day to advocate for people. We're, using our talents to support others. And it's just inclusive to, some of those who have fought the good fight in blood, sweat and tears. It's just a great feeling to have.
Absolutely. As you sit there in Philadelphia, I'm reminded of one of Dorothy Irene Height's chief lieutenants, of course, and the great C. Dolores Tucker. And I think about the fact that we knew that's in our living memory to see those sisters in particular who've done this work and how much we owe them, this debt we owe. Mustafa, like Teresa, like Larry, you've worked in the halls of power. You've seen policy making up close, the ugly work, the lobbying work, and thinking back 60 years to the Dixiecrats who filibustered, who were then in the Democratic Party and now are in the Republican Party, for those who are confused about that. Walk us through how you think about the policy implications of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I know you've had a lot of those battles on Capitol Hill, and you've had them in the streets pushing Capitol Hill. Talk to us about what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has meant to us as a tool in our ongoing struggle for equity and social justice.
It has helped us to sort of address that quote that we've often talked about when we've often said that a system cannot fail those it was never meant to protect. Mm-hmm. The policies that we have had to work diligently to be able to put into place have required the blood of our own people. And out of those sets of actions, out of folks seeing those batons cracking our skulls, those dark Mississippi roads with individuals back behind us and the trauma and fear that came out of that, but also knowing that if we could just make it to the next town, then we might be able to live to fight another day. It's the exact same thing that has gone on in city halls and in county commissions and state houses and on Capitol Hill of bringing our stories forward, of the injustices that have continued to happen, but also that there is the possibility of a better day if we are able to bring folks together and can actually change the dynamics in our country and inside of our communities. In that fight, when Fannie Lou Hamer used to say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, we fought for education. And now we see in this moment that the fight still continues. When we most recently had the Supreme Court cases, the Harvard case and the University of North Carolina case, where they're trying to limit our ability to be able to learn, goes right back to 1964 and some of the things that Dr. King and others were fighting for in the Civil Rights Act, because they understood that if we could not learn, then we might not be able to earn. It also talked about health care. Dr. King, if you listen to some of his speeches, also talked about the need that existed in that space. And now, 60 plus years later, we continue to see Republicans trying to roll back and weaken the Affordable Care Act, knowing that it has a disproportionate opportunity to help to protect many of our communities who often haven't been able to afford health care. When we look at, some of the things around criminal justice and how Dr. King and so many others were fighting diligently to make sure that we had voting rights. And yes, there were a number of different acts over a few-year period there that began to address some of this, but now we see also the rolling back of many of the things that they and others had fought for, making it more tough for us to be in polling station or to have polling stations, drop boxes, IDs, all these other types of things that come from our past. And now moving forward, Republicans are utilizing to try and weaken our opportunity to fully participate. It has been about a dilution. So when you ask the question about Capitol Hill, we have to pay particular attention to not just one sweeping action, but the cumulative impacts and the cumulative effects of their whittling away of our rights, of our power, of our opportunities to truly address economics and be able to, address the wealth gap that still goes on in our country. And that requires, Dr. Carr, a couple of things. One, it requires us being educated about the system and then getting engaged and how we can modify that system to actually meet some of our needs. And the other part of it is making sure that our representation shows up. It shows up in our stories. It shows up in our actions. It shows up not only in the impacts that have happened, but also the wins that we have been able to move forward on, and demanding that we have to continue to grow those out. I often say that I'm not satisfied. I got that from an early civil rights leader who said that when we become satisfied, then they will continue to lower the bar. They'll lower the expectations, and they'll lower the amount of work that needs to go into making sure that our North Star, which is justice, ever becomes a reality.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Brother Larry, Dr. Walker, in that same vein, thinking about what Mustafa just laid out for us there, I'm not sure that folk necessarily pause to think about the impact of the Civil Rights Act and some of the numbers that we become well familiar with. We, of course, talked earlier about Title IX, which comes out of the Education Amendments of 1972, but Title VII, employment discrimination, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Title VI, discrimination, among other things, in higher education. As you sit there in Florida, having, again, been in the federal apparatus as a staffer and policy wonk, and then now educating young people among your many tasks, maybe if you wouldn't mind reflecting a little bit on the 60 years since and the white lash, because clearly in many ways what this right-wing movement in this country is responding to is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and so much that has come. And it seems like they've taken, as Mustafa said, so much of the language of that act and flipped it literally in a 180 on its head in some ways and made it exactly backward. There in the state of Florida, they hate, it seems, federal intervention unless they control the federal apparatus. Your thoughts on the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and what has happened since it was passed 60 years ago today?
Dr. Carr, this is an important but tough question, because first of all, I'm thinking about, you mentioned my Hill work. I'm thinking about my former boss, former Congressman Owens, who, you know, was a civil rights activist and was a Morehouse man also. And at the time represented the 11th Congressional District in New York, which is now the 9th. But, you know, Dr. Carr, I think it's really important. We think about the importance of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For folks who are watching, understand these are part of the Great Society programs. We talk about the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, also the Elementary Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act. These were all civil rights bills and part of, like I said, the Great Society programs, which are now and will in the future be dismantled. I think one of the keys as it relates to what you talked about and what could happen, the repercussions for the next several months into January of next year when we swear in whoever president is, particularly if it's Donald Trump, is that I need people to understand that civil rights, the plan based on the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, is that they want to use the Civil Rights Act and weaponize it to center it within whiteness to suggest that white males are being discriminated against. People really need to understand what's happening here. Affirmative action has been dismantled. We've gotten rid of Roe v. Wade. We've already talked about recently today and over the last couple of days what happened with the Supreme Court, not just this week, but last week and over the last several months. But in terms of policy issues and also the Supreme Court, we're in for a very serious fight. And so it's going to be very important, not only in terms of, you know, going out and vote, but also who's going to hold on to House and the Senate. Does Hakeem Jeffries become the first black Speaker of the House? Because absolutely what's going to be really critically important is have checks and balances, you know, particularly, like I said, Donald Trump wins the White House. Because what we're going to see is a continued rollback of all these protections in place that were designed to redress years and years of discrimination, outward discrimination that black folks have had to endure. And now what I've suggested is that what some conservative right-wingers want is they want a Jim Crow remix. And we're going to have to make sure that we stay on the front lines and our eyes are wide open. Because if we're not, what we'll find is that we'll look back on this period of time in 2024 to 2025. And the people that come after us will ask us, where will you stand in, what side of the history will you stand on when the storm came? Because there's a hurricane coming. And if folks, like I said, are not prepared, or not actively engaged, or not voting, or not getting other people to vote, then these pillars that Dr. King sacrificed his life for, among others, will look back in history and say, who's responsible for not standing at the gates to push the hurricane back?
Absolutely, brother. Well, I mean, for those who are watching, you probably won't hear anybody else discuss the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if you do, you won't hear it discussed the way we just heard it discussed. And so we're going to take a break and come back with our last block. Thank you, all three of you. And when we return, we'll continue our conversation. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hey, what's up? Geek Tony in the place to be. Got Kicked Out Your Mama's University, creator and executive producer of Fat Tuesdays, an air hip-hop comedy. But right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Bryson Muir, the son of former NFL player Daniel Muir, is missing. and believed to be in danger. The 14-year-old is from Logansport, Indiana. On June 16th, he left his grandmother's home in Garfield Heights, Ohio, and has not been seen or heard from since. Bryson is 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighs 185 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing an orange Under Armour shirt and blue jeans. Anyone with information about Bryson Muir is urged to call the Indiana State Police at 1-317-327-3811. The former white Cleveland police officer who shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice has resigned from his latest job as a police officer in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. That's right, he's had several jobs since he killed Tamir Rice. Timothy Lohman had been employed by the city for, quote, some time, end quote, before people learned about the officer's past. Rice was killed outside a recreation center on November 22nd, 2014, after police were called for a report of a man with a gun. Lohman opened fire when he said the boy reached toward his waistband. The gun turned out, as we all know, to be an air pistol. A Louisiana parish swears its first black sheriff in. On Monday, Henry Whitehorn took the oath of office, look at those people there, as Caddo Parish's sheriff. Whitehorn was elected to the position on March 23rd, defeating Republican John Nicholson in 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 separate ballot countings following the November 18th, 2023 election. Nicholson contested Whitehorn's win by a 1-vote margin. Whitehorn received 21,621 votes, while Nicholson received 21,620. Here's what Whitehorn had to say about his plans and being the first black sheriff.
And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I hold to the commitments that I've made to make this help make this a safe parish, do something for our young people, and make sure that integrity is at the forefront of everything that we do. All I can say is this is just a great day for me and my family, and I'm honored that the citizens put that much confidence and trust in me to elect me as their next sheriff of Caddo Parish. You know, we can make decisions all day, but if it's not what the citizens want and not helping them, then they're going to feel the same way about this department. We have got to work together, collaborate with all of our non-government organizations, our faith-based organizations, to ensure that we're putting good programs in place to keep our young kids out of trouble. It's one thing to get them before we get them in jail. And so my goal is to work with them before they become part of a system.
Caddo Parish, Louisiana, Henry Whitehorn Sr. There's a new sheriff in town. Rudy Giuliani can add another red-letter title to his distinguished career. He can add the title of former attorney to his many accolades as a panel of judges in the New York State Appeals Court disbarred him, quote, effective immediately, end quote, for his efforts to defraud the country and put up a slate of fake pro-Trump electors. The former mayor and Trump personal attorney was initially suspended from practicing law while the New York court weighed discipline proceedings against him. In its decision, the court said that Giuliani, quote, essentially conceded, end quote, to most of the facts supporting the alleged acts of misconduct. Giuliani could also lose his law license here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. He also filed for bankruptcy last year after being ordered to pay $148 million in damages to 2 black Georgia election workers over lies he spread about them that upended their lives with racist threats and harassments. Well, friends, Mustafa, Teresa, Larry, it's quite a trio of stories there to begin to bring us home on Tuesday. Any thoughts on any of those stories? Larry, you first, brother.
Talk about Giuliani, because, you know, Dr. Carr, if you think about, you go back to when he was mayor in Stop and Frisk and how it disproportionately impacted black and brown people. I think people need to understand how he got from there to then suggesting, among others, that black and brown votes in various states, including my hometown, Philadelphia, were illegally cast. The point I'm making is when we talk about the arc of democracy and the importance of truth and fairness and making sure all people are treated as humans, when you start from that point where he was mayor and they were stopping brothers and sisters all, consistently, and then, like I said, his fake electors and all the nonsense regarding where people voted illegally, which we know we didn't. It shows you how in America, when you ignore the concerns of minoritized communities, how it will eventually affect everyone in this country. And now I think this is the lesson learned with the action that took place today.
Yes, indeed. Mustafa, any thoughts about any of those stories we've seen?
I mean, I could take a bite at all three of them.
Yes, sir.
Let me follow my good brother there. You got to work really hard, extremely hard to get disbarred. We got about 1.5 million attorneys in our country, and only about 500 individuals get disbarred every year. So that means that not only the things that you're doing egregious, but in many instances, they're also dangerous. There's a criteria that they go through to decide if you're going to be disbarred or not. And that means that Rudy Giuliani worked really hard, and he gets exactly what he deserves for being a Trump sycophant. So if you want to spout lies all the time and you want to do damage to those sisters down there, then you got exactly what you deserve. And I can't wait until they take a look at his D.C. license and make a decision there. Yes. In relationship to our dear brother there in Louisiana, that shows you that you have power unless you give it away. Because going through 3 different sets of elections, if you will, to finally be named as the sheriff shows our resilience. It shows our commitment to not give up, because when we know that we're doing something that matters, then we're willing to put the work into it. And I appreciate what he shared, and I hope that those words become real when he talked about community being the center of policing, because we understand that it is not just on the side of the equation about locking folks up. It is about doing the hard work beforehand to make sure that folks never have to be in that situation, and for them to also know that there is compassion in the law. In relationship to the dynamics in West Virginia, do better. Do better, because not only did you just have a case where you had white individuals adopting black children and then putting them in the modern day slavery, but you also invited an individual to be a part of your police force who killed an unarmed black child, not a man, but a child. So in all those situations, we have a responsibility as human beings to do better.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mustafa. Take us home, Teresa. What you thinking about?
You know what? I really stand with both my colleagues, on all those issues. Specifically, I did want to briefly mention the swearing in of Whitehorn. What he's doing is absolutely exemplary. But we had one in 2019. Her name was Sheriff Rochelle Bilal here in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Where we did a mix of policing, community policing, and community activity, really working in her favor as being the first African-American woman in 181 years of that office. She has really shown that, you could take law enforcement to a new level and to new heights by organizing, planning, and engaging with community hands-on. So I am so excited to hear that we have more members that are looking at Philadelphia as a model to also bring to their cities. And it has to be that community cooperation partnership to get things started. So kudos to Mr. Whitehorn on that.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, I want to thank Mustafa Santiago Ali, Teresa Lundy, and Larry Walker. As always, our Tuesday conversation that we've had. Thank you all for participating. I'm sitting here because Roland is on his way to one of the cradles of humanity. Of course, we're talking about Ethiopia. And Lalibela is where the stone churches of Ethiopia are. I told him I hope you get a chance to go by there and pay respects to some of the oldest churches in the world. Those of our kindred who are over in France, y'all be careful. There's an election coming up in a few days, and we are looking at elections. Kylian Mbappe, who is the great African French footballer, has been telling people that they need to pay attention to what's going on in France with this right-wing Marie Le Pen. Looks like the racists may take the majority in the French legislature in the second round. July 4th, of course, that is when they're going to have the snap election in England. And we're probably going to see a new prime minister over there. Rich Snack is going to lose his position. Steve Bannon is in jail, but his movement marches on globally. And finally, for those of you who are tennis fans, we know that Coco Gauff, Sloane Stephens, Madison Keys, and Frances Tiafoe have all won at Wimbledon yesterday. So we got some black folks still in the mix, and we hope that we wish them everything. So those of you who will be taking off some of the rest of the week, enjoy White Juneteenth. And please, support the Black Star Network. Download that app. Make sure that you contribute, and you see there the graphic. iPhone, TV, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Fire TV, Xbox One, Smart TV. We take all the kind of money, the jingles, that folds, but most importantly, donate. Looking for 20,000 subscribers, $50 a year. This is the Black Star Network. So never forget, make those donations and keep this network strong. Thanks to the whole crew here at the Black Star Network, and we will see you tomorrow. Holla.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?